Welcome to the last talk for the How To Talks by Postdoc series. Due to the popularity of this topic last year, we've invited back Dr. Becca Martin to speak on the active learning teaching revolution, technologies to assist with teaching STEM so that your students actually learn. Dr. Martin received her Ph.D. in microbiology and immunology from VCU, and she's currently a postdoc there as well. She's also an IRACTA fellow, and she's going to speak more on that later, but she received training through that program on research and teaching. Please welcome Dr. Martin.
Okay, so I'm going to do this pretty informal, so if you have any questions or want to stop me in between things, please do. But today I want to go over some of the technologies that can help you through making formative assessments that will help you in the classroom or active learning assessments. But the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to get you to take out your phone or your laptop, and I want you to go to you can either go to this website here, or you can text this, and then to this number here. And then that will actually join. And then when we enter the poll through Poll Everywhere, you can respond. And I'm going to get you to tell me what active learning is to you. And you can just text it in and it should show up on the screen. So what Poll Everywhere is, it's a free software that you can use. If you select the higher education free, it allows you 40 responses. If you go through the regular one, it's only 25 responses per poll. So later in the class, we're going to go through how to actually set up a poll in this software and how to use it.
So you want us to text the number and your name?
So that will join it. So you're going to text that name to this number. And then it'll say you're joined, and then after that you can answer, and you don't have to join it again until the, you don't have to join again unless it knocks you off.
Is it an I or?
It's an I.
I mean,
Because it's my name.
Ah.
It actually is a little confusing. It does look like a 1. So one good thing about this is you can you can do this in a lecture format. You can do this in a, say you have one classroom where you come in for 1 hour and you're just talking to students, or you're going and giving a lecture at a conference and you want them to kind of give some feedback. But the downside to this is you can't filter this at all, so somebody can type whatever they want up here. So depending on the maturity of your students, it can turn into some interesting responses.
Is there a way that names are associated with?
This is not one that names are associated with it. So this is one that's an open response format. You can also do a word cloud or some things like that. It's just an interesting kind of feedback so you can see how people are answering. So just while everyone is responding, so sometimes when I have activities, what I'll do is I'll tell my class that they're going to wrap up activities, so I may walk around the classroom, especially with a group activity, and then when I walk back up to the front of the room, or I might raise my hand, I'll either say it in the beginning of the class if that's going to signal that we're going to wrap up, so that they can know that without me having to shout, especially if it's group learning where they're going to have lots of talking. So lots of good answers here. Testing students with realistic problems, active, not passive, engaging hands-on learning, going beyond lecturing. Basically, what we want it to be is we want to take instructor-centered learning and move it to student-centered learning. We want to place the learning on the responsibility of the student, and we want to take it away from the sage on the stage kind of place. So in STEM we have this vision and change through the National Science Foundation that says we're going to teach science, basically how science is done. So when you're designing your class or your lecture, you first want to decide what kind of learning goals and objectives that you want to do. Even if you're just designing one lecture or you're designing a whole course. And then you want to see what kind of summative assessment you need or your exam. So the first thing you're going to do is what you want them to learn, and then how you're going to test that they know it. And then I want to go over some technologies that are going to help with this. And then we're going to go through how we're going to align this with active learning. So I want you to get into groups of 3. You can do 2 or 3. And I'm going to give you 3 minutes to read this and look at these questions. And then once you get together, I want the person with the birthday closest to today to go here
Jeez, that would
to
be.
this website. Now, if I was in a class, I'd be able to email this link to you.
So.
And so it would be easier.
I just had a birthday 2 weeks ago.
The person with the birthday closest to today. You could also do the person with the longest name. This calls out someone in your group to be responsible for the answer. This is just a nice, helpful hint for group work without having to call in names or select on people and kind of take the safety out of learning. So you can, this is a random choice. So normally you would email it out to your class, or you'd be able to click, if you could click on this link, it would take you directly to it. And it would give you automatic permission. So if you had these slides before class, you could do it. So what is Traxoline? It's a
New form of Zienter.
It's a Zienter. Okay. So what I want you to take from this is an exam communicates what an instructor cares about. This test is only fact-based knowledge, and it only requires memorization. So if this is what we were learning, and these are the questions I asked you, they seem like they may take higher understanding if you just look at these questions, but they're actually just memorization. And what we can see from this is I can insert any kind of words that you're not going to know anything about. These are just made up words, and you can answer these questions. So when you write an assessment, you need to make sure that you require more from your students than just memorization. Okay, so now I'm going to minimize this and we're going to go to Google Forms, so I want you to see that. There we go. Alright, so this is the quiz that would have come up if you had clicked in it, and you could have gotten a grade on this, or it could have been random. So it's through Google Forms, and it's a blank quiz, and it's really easy to set up and then send out to your students. You can either make it a random response or not, and so then you can select the answer. I think it's I'm in edit mode. And then I could ask for your names or your group members' names, and then have you turn that in. I can also make an answer key for it. And then once my results are in, I can look at the class's overall responses. If somebody got in. And then I can look at individual responses and scroll through them. So I can see who did what. So that's what's nice about Google Forms and Google Quizzes. And they're free, and you can do it through a Gmail account. So I'm going to minimize that because we're going to go back to that. Okay. So when we're making effective learning objectives and exam questions, we want to use Bloom's taxonomy. So are any of you familiar with Bloom's taxonomy? Okay. So what it is it's basically this inverted pyramid. And It's really kind of like the food pyramid, where it's a little bit confusing, but where you have the lower order questions on the bottom, and those are the questions that really just have recall of facts. And then as you move up the pyramid, they have higher order questions. And what you want on your assessments is you want at least 70% of your questions to be higher order questions. You're going to have some questions that are going to be memorization questions. That's always going to happen. But you want to have your higher order questions on your exam as well. So there's some call words here that are really good to kind of see what your exams are like. Now there's this really good tool. I have a link to it later in this, here's the paper. It's called the Blooming Biology Tool. And it's a way to look at your assessments or to create an assessment. And you can see what kind of level of blooms you want. Do you want application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation? And what kind of question you need to use. And if you can do it in a multiple choice format. And so this tells you how you can adapt it. And really the only one that's unable to be adapted is synthesis, because choosing between two choices is not really synthesizing any data. And this is a really nice tool to use. Also, rubrics. When you have in your class, when you are grading your assessment, it's really nice to have rubrics because it gives more than just a grade, and it allows feedback and transparency. And so how do you know where you went wrong if you don't have feedback? And so there's this nice free software here called RubyStar, and it's for teachers.org. This is actually a rubric that I created for an exam that I gave last week. And so it allowed me to use this for 2 questions in an immunobiology exam. And so that when a student comes back to me and says, hey, why did I not get this right, or why did I get these points off, this is why. You can also create it and have different categories on here, like writing strength, and then have what each category is and points are. So it allows you to kind of do what you want in each part of the rubric. It can be as detailed or as brief as you want it to be.
You don't provide this rubric to them before they take it.
You could. I don't provide this before. This is for me because when I grade, it's nice to have something in front of you so that your grading is the same across all of your exams.
So could you provide this at the end when you give back their grades and say, okay, this is how I graded? And
So students that come for questions, I do provide it
okay.
to them, but you could provide it. I haven't done that. I make one if I'm doing a project. So if there's a project, you can make one on the front end, and they're usually conclusions or safety for a lab report or things like that.
So full credit is when they get it right and then you get 1 point. I mean, I thought if you have multiple choice and they get answer, that had to be one answer and the other one 0, 0.
So this is a short answer.
Oh, this is your answer, okay.
This is an essay exam. So each of the questions was worth 4 points.
Okay.
Another question about the previous slide. You don't have to go to it, but is there a way to set the tests to be timed if they need to be? You know how you created the quizzes or the tests in the Google form? Can they be set to shut down at a certain time or something?
So not with this one, but there's another technology called Kahoot that you can time each question, and that will assign points. So that's free as well. That one plays music in the background, and so it feels a little bit more childish when you do it, but it's a nice free tool.
Cahoots with the K?
Kahoot, yeah, Kahoot.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So now that you have your learning objectives and goals, and you've made your summative assessment, which is your exams, how are you going to know that you're learning what you want? This is where you need your formative assessment or your active learning in your class. And the students also need to know that they're learning the right thing. And this provides them practice with your exam questions. This is another reason why it's really important to have your summative assessment done before you make your in-class activities, because this way you can kind of practice them. Okay, So a lot of you have probably used clickers or heard of clickers. VCU and the undergraduate campus uses clickers heavily. Over here on the graduate campus, we don't have clickers available to us. So that's why the Poll Everywhere is really nice software.
Well, we have it in middle school.
Okay.
And we use them.
Yeah, I mean, they're really great because they actually are assigned to someone for grading.
Yeah.
So think, pair, share is a really nice technique for clicker-based. Is anybody familiar with think, pair, share? It's kind of like the first active learning thing that you can use in a classroom, and it can be adapted for any size class. And this is where you initially poll with a clicker question, and then you have them pair up and discuss it for a couple minutes, and then you re-poll. And so what you want to do is actually pick a question that your students are going to get about 70% of them are going to get wrong the first time. Because you want something that's going to be a challenging question. If it's too easy, then you're not going to be learning anything in that pair-up moment. And if it's too hard, if no one in the class gets it, then pairing up is not going to be worth it. So when you pair up, it can also provide an environment that's kind of safe for students to kind of discuss ideas, and you can convince each other of maybe the right answer. And you'll notice that the right answer will increase in your repolling.
Have you given the knowledge base at some point for them to answer this?
So it depends on the format of your lecture. So you can either have some kind of in-class lecture. So if you're doing a class where you're still lecturing, I would highly suggest breaking up your lecture with things like think, pair, share, and activities. So later I'll suggest how to break up your lecture. If not, you can actually kind of semi-flip your classroom where you put a reading assignment outside of class, and you come in with some questions like this. So they should know, or you can do it from the previous day's material. So we can start the day with this. Also, this is good for any class size. All right, so this is where we're going to go over how to use Poll Anywhere. Poll Everywhere. I keep saying Poll Anywhere. There we go. All right, so when you open your account, you want to make sure and select Higher Education Free. Otherwise, you're limited to 25 responses, and most classes here or where you're going to be responses are larger than that. See this, you get 40 responses per poll. Okay. So when you go, you're going to need to download the app. So you can either download it for PowerPoint or Google Docs, and it's going to be a little insert into your PowerPoint or Google Docs so that you can run it. And it was really easy. I came in and did it here. It took me about a minute to put it in this PowerPoint. When you're making a poll, just hit plus, and we can start a question. You can also do a survey. A survey is kind of like a quiz. So that's similar. You can do a series of questions and have your students take that. Now for a question, let's type something. Does anybody have a suggestion of a question?
Is this active learning?
Okay. So now we can decide how we want our answer to come back to us. Do we want to make it multiple choice? And here we can either put in an image. So say it was is this an apple? And we could upload an image here, put an image in. We could put in, say, what process, which photo shows the process of photosynthesis, and we could put in pathways. I mean, you could make this as simple or as complicated as you want. You can make it open-ended. This is what we did earlier. You can do a word cloud. This is where it kind of jumbles them sideways. A cluster, it just takes fragments of your responses. K-Ticker's a little bit the same. You can do a question and answer. So this is where someone submits a question, or I'll put questions up, and you can vote yes or no on that. So I can say, do you think onions are delicious? And you can say yes or no. You can rank things. So, and then also you can click on an image. So say we want to say, where is a place located? And you can click on an image. Or you can upload your own image and say, where is the, this bond located? And you can have them click on it. And it's just going to show random responses. You're not going to see or be able to attribute it to the person. So it's just a way for you to get feedback of what your class is doing, which is really good for you because if they're pointing to the complete wrong place, you know that you need some more work. So, and we'll just go with open-ended because it's the easiest to click on. And then, it's trying to download that. And just hit create. It's going to put it up. And this is just one of the things you have to hit activate here, and that just runs your poll. If you don't click that, it just sits there. So that's for the day you use it. Let me click out of it. Go back to polls. You can do two things. You can download the slide to insert it. Here, we'll go back to it. So if I want to put it in as a slide, how to present, download poll as a slide. It's going to give me a slide in PowerPoint, and I can just copy it and drop it in. It's not going to show that poll until it's in presenter view. Okay? That's what the polls look like here when they're not in presenter view. All right. Any questions about how to use it? It's really user-friendly.
So then do you need to be signed into your account in order to present?
I didn't sign in on PowerPoint here, but I am signed in on the web. We could try that. I'm not actually sure. You do have to be able to access the internet. So that is something. If you're somewhere where you don't have internet access, then it's not going to work. Okay. This is just some screenshots. So then we're going to go to group learning. So group learning is my favorite part of active learning. So I think this is where you really get a lot of feedback and you really get a lot of growth in your class. And so we're going to move right into a group activity. It's one of my favorites. And so I have some paper if you don't have paper and a pen. But this is one from a biostats class, but type 1 and type 2 errors. So I want you to read this. I want you to get in groups of 4. So you can turn around. If you don't have groups of 4, you can get into groups of 3 or 5 and assign 2 roles. But I'm willing to accept blank. You're going to put a number in there. Useless drugs or false positives for every blank good drugs that we miss. And then when evaluating side effects, I'm willing to reject blank safe drugs or false positives for every blank dangerous drugs that we miss, false negatives. Okay? So I'm going to give you 3 minutes for the first part, and then we're going to add a layer to this, okay? So if you want to fill this out personally for yourself, and then we're going to switch it up. Okay, so now we're going to add another layer. I want you to assign everybody a role. Someone's a doctor, someone's a patient, someone's an insurance company, and someone's a drug company.
Okay.
And then you're going to fill out as an assigned role, and you're going to see if your responses change. And then you need to persuade the doctor, because that's the one that's actually going to make the decision.
Evaluating.
So this is a super controversial one. So everyone see the gray areas here? And it provides a lot of discussion because there's not a real right answer. This is not something
You want to make
is a
sure
right
there's some
answer.
kind of impact.
Now,
Right.
what we proceed with, and I'm not going to ask you to actually do this, but is I have them write a 1-minute paper. This would be writing 1 minute, for 1 minute, how their roles changed, the numbers, and how did that make you feel about it? And then what do I do with this information? So say you have a class of 300 students here. That's a lot of papers. I'm not going to read and grade all this, right?
Yeah.
So I can do 2 things. So I can, because we're in groups, I can say, well, The student with the last letter of the name that comes first in the alphabet. It's another random choice that promotes that person to be accountable. So it's random without putting a name or a spotlight on anyone. And then they could put the names of their group members on there, and that could be the group assignment grade, and it could be participation grade. Usually I would suggest a 1-minute paper be a participation grade. And then you would read those. You could have all of them turn it in, and I would suggest reading about 10% of them. Now you can do this for any topic. You can do this for an assignment and have them write a 1-minute paper about what they understood or any question and read about 10%, and that's going to give you a picture of the whole class if you read a random 10% of the class. And then you don't have to invest all the time in reading all those papers, and then you can talk about it, and you have to provide feedback. So that's the most important part about this, is that when the next time you meet, you need to provide feedback on that paper. So talk about what the right response was. So no, this is more an opinion, but if you were talking about what the correct response was, what you'd look for in that answer, and what you'd look for on a summative assessment. All right. So group problem solving is really great because it gets a group talking. So it really brings in the human experience and engagement. So it has you talking. We brought in something that was a little bit controversial, and we were able to assess it. Now you could also assess it with, say, that Google form, the Google quiz, or you could use Poll Anywhere to assess the group work. So you could have them all fill out a questionnaire during the group work. Or you could have a representative fill out a worksheet or a Google form that was graded. So there's lots of ways you can grade group work. So where you can get together, you can get a problem, get talking, and still get a grade for it. Now what's next? There's other ways you can get together other than just problem solving. You can do strip sequences. So we're going to go through decision-making activities, concept maps, figure lists, etc. So strip sequences, this is really great because it strengthens the student's logical thinking process. And so this is where you give them a jumbled process and you ask them to put it in order. You can also do this with a think, pair, share. This is an example of one. So place these steps in order. You could follow with a poll for this. So this is a nice picture form. You could do it in Word form. You don't have to answer this one. Okay. I know you all wanted to. Decision-making activities. So that's kind of what you were doing before, like the drug dilemma. It brings in gray areas. Case studies. This is really, really important, especially in medical education, professional education, because it also is reflective of how you're going to engage with your patients. But in any context, the human narrative is more engaging. So if you can bring in something that's a current topic, or something that's going on in the news right now, vaccine development, things like that, they can always get your students engaged. The discussion is always in a broader context, and then emotional resonance provides a greater buy-in. So the students really will understand it more because they will have a greater buy-in with that. They'll connect better. Another way to do this is concept maps. So the software up here is free. It's cmap.ihmp.us, and it's really great for longer projects or group projects. And what you can do is give them a list of terms, and you can have them make interconnections. And it can be as complicated as you want it to be, and you can have them add to it over several class periods. This is really great because they define the relationship by interconnecting them. This can also be used as an assignment outside of class. So this is a free software, and it's really nice because it's easy to read. You don't have to worry about handwriting. And then also scientific figures. So in STEM, we read a lot of journal articles. And so we want to be able to interpret those. And so using scientific figures for your active learning activities is also good, as well as your summative assessments. So what I want to do is you to get with a partner, or you can get into a group, and I want you to come up with an active learning assessment that you could use these figures in. Just, you don't have to tell me the whole thing, but for an example, like ask them to write the figure legend for this. Now I'm just going to describe what this is. So you know, this is the actual breathing capacity with these drugs, albuterol, placebo, acupuncture, or no intervention, and this is how the patient is feeling with those same drugs. So just think about it, and I'll give you 4 minutes, and think about what you could ask your students to tell you about this. All right, if you want to type in, so you should already be logged in, if you want to type it up there, tell me what you think we should do. These figures or scientific figures in general. Any ideas? Maybe abstract, that's pretty good. That's a pretty intense one.
Yeah.
A new figure that combines the data. You could pull it into a class discussion afterwards, so you definitely could. You could potentially say, what is the overall conclusion of this data? Rate the figure legends. You could take off the, you could have them annotate that figure. So you could take off some of the axes or something. Yep, ask students to identify patients that might not get the same results. Definitely if you're going over like placebo effect, so that was from a study that involved placebo effect. So some of the patients, the right graph was actually how patients felt, and so they, with the placebo they felt better even though they weren't breathing better. All right, I think a lot of those things are really good. So see, here's some other things you could do. Explain how variables fit into the figure. The conclusions, that was one of them. Ask them how to explain how they solved the problem. So how would you solve the problem going forward? And then you could title the figure. That's a simpler one. So if you want to organize your lecture and you just want to introduce a little bit of active learning and you don't want to completely flip it, which is most people don't have the time to sacrifice the content to completely flip it, and they want to introduce some of the lecture content, some active learning in the beginning, and then you can move more and more active learning in. What you first want to do is break it up, your lecturing, with activities. So 10 to 12 minutes of lecture is pretty much the attention span that your class has. Any longer than that, then you're no longer getting any attention. So they're stopped listening to you. So if you interject a 3 to 5 minute activity in there, you're going to engage them and you're going to get some learning, and then you can bring them back and maybe talk about what you just did, give them some feedback on it, and then go further with another 10 to 12 minutes of lecture, another activity, and then feedback, and go forward. At the end of the class, what's really important and what I like to do is a 5-minute reflection activity. So what this does is I actually like 1-minute papers for this, and I ask them to write what's the most important point in this lecture, what was the muddiest point. You can also write what did you have trouble with, what questions do you still have. And again, you just filter through about 10% of this, and then you can go back through the next lecture and clear this up. And so you can also do this on a Google form. So I'm going to go to a Google form that I created. Don't fill this one out. But so what we do is data, what I said before, and then I'm going to show you the Google form that I have for this class summary. So if I provide reading, so what's one part of today's class that worked for you? Short answer, they can type it in. What's one topic that you feel needs more clarification? Now, if you respond to this, it's anonymous. So this is nice because it provides them a chance to send this to me, and I can either, when I send this out, say, is this going to record your email or not? And so for this, I would not. Did you do your reading prior to class? So if I assigned a reading assignment, I could ask this, yes or no. Did the reading help with the work today? And then I can say, would I assign this again? Will I make changes? So this is a nice assessment of myself, and I can know that if I'm going to change my lecture or change my activity. If we had a big activity in there, you could potentially put, did this activity work for you today? Did you feel like you learned through it? So you can ask lots of questions for this. You can also do a longer version of this for a midterm evaluation. It would be just for you or your class if you were doing an entire course. And it's actually really nice to get feedback just for you. And this actually, you can keep these and you can use it for your tenure evaluation. It's really nice for you because you can address it to your students and you can get, like, library class, you can get feedback, as well as you can write a longer one. And it gives them a chance. You can do a paragraph, and then you can see your responses as well. So those responses are actually for the other one. But all right. Also, I want to talk for a second about inclusion. So we only have a couple more seconds. But if this text today that I use is actually called Open Dyslexic. I know it looks a little bit like Comic Sans, but if you have dyslexic students in your class, it's weighted heavier at the bottom, so it's easier for dyslexic students to read. It's free, and you can get download it. This is opendyslexic.org, opendyslexic.org. Also, consideration for colorblind students, make sure that if you have a graph, that you don't do red and green lines, and then ask a color-based question, because there's a good portion of the population that is colorblind, and they will not be able to answer your question, and they may not tell you. So you want to make sure you have dots and dashes or solid lines. Another thing is that active learning is more inclusive, and there's convincing evidence that shows it can help reduce racial stereotype threat. So I have a really nice website here if you want to learn more about that. It's www.cirtl.net, and it's the Center for Integration of Research, Teaching, and Learning, and that is an entire other talk that I would love to give some time. But and then here's some of the links that I talked about. There's Kahoot is another form of polling. It does, you can do competitive quizzes between groups. And then also WeVideo. Now it's $20 to $40 a year, and that's for screencasting. So if you want to record videos and embed them for your students to watch before class, it costs $24 to $40 a year, but it doesn't have all the annoying ads that the free webcasting software has. So the free ones have terrible ads at the bottom, and they can be interrupted with like commercials in the middle of your webcast. This one does not have it, and $20 to $40 a year is not that much for you, and it's free for your students once you embed it. Right? And that is it. Any questions?
So does Blackboard have any tools that you like that help with active learning?
Blackboard has some good quiz tools, so you can make a graded quiz in Blackboard. So that is actually really nice, and then it is graded for you. I also like that you can see, when you put things up, you can see who viewed it. That's one of my favorite things, and you can also lock notes during the exam so that they can't access it while the exam is going on.
Okay.
I know that's nothing to do with active learning. That's one of my other favorite parts of Blackboard.
In general,
Yeah,
you seem like your experience with teaching, so I wanted to know what you liked about Blackboard.
So where I've taught, I actually taught at Virginia Union University. I did a teaching externship there, and they actually don't have Blackboard. So I actually had to do everything through other technology. And then here, I haven't used Blackboard in the graduate teaching I've done.
Okay.
I mean, I use it to post slides.
Mm-hmm.
Jason?
Yeah, so I like the idea of like having them read stuff outside of class, which
Mhm.
might help so that you don't have to cover the content
Yes.
and then have more opportunity for active learning. I'm just curious, how do they typically respond? Like, do they tell you they're reading it, or?
So there's a really cool thing called just-in-time teaching. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. So the Google quiz is really great for that. So that's where you assign them a reading assignment, and then you give them one of those quizzes to do before class. And it goes with a name, and then the quizzes are assigned points. And you actually ask them questions that are pertinent to the reading. And then at the end, you ask them what they didn't understand about the reading. And you can make it participation-based, or you can make it a minimal amount of points in their grade. And that can kind of ensure they do the reading. And then you look at it the night before your lecture. So that's why it's called just in time, or either a couple hours before your lecture. So you go in the morning and look at it and just kind of review some of the responses at the bottom of what they didn't understand. And you might be able to kind of modify what you emphasize in your teaching that day. So that's something that a lot of people do here on the medical campus, is the just-in-time teaching.
One way we had a class that we recorded the lecture beforehand,
Mm-hmm.
and then put a quiz that applies to the lecture. And we know who took the quiz and who didn't, and the percentage of it. And they're allowed to take it as many times. And then the lecture room would be more of a case discussion and interaction than, say, presentation of fact. And we use the clickers in the class also for attendance. We don't say there's a policy, but
Mm-hmm.
that when they tracks who was there and who was not there. That's another way to do it.
Yeah.
To avoid talking in the lecture room most of the time.
I will say that if you're going to have the reading in class and you're going to have it required, don't go over the reading, or they're never going to do it.
Right.
If you go over the reading, just even to give a refresher, they're always going to rely on that as a crutch.
Right.
So especially if you have an entire course at your disposal, you can train your students that that's going to be the norm for them, that they have to do that reading to be able to be successful in the activities in your class. So that's something that you can train them. It's harder if you only have like 2 or 3, like say you're doing a team taught class, and you're doing 2 or 3 lectures in a class. That's harder to get students to do the reading. You can assign that they most of the time they're not going to. Videos are better for that, so you can embed those into Blackboard or put the link on Blackboard and see who's watched them. They're a little bit easier, but I'd say you still probably only get about 50% of them watch the video.
Can you embed videos from YouTube into the lecture or into Blackboard?
So you can do it into lecture. You can put a link on
Is it
Blackboard.
legal? Somebody told me that.
So
It's a copyright.
that would be, I think you can put a link, and as long as it's cited correctly, it should be legal. It depends on the content on YouTube. Now, some of the content on YouTube is improperly copyrighted, like it's not copyrighted, it's I guess it's kind of stolen content. So that can be an issue, publishing it on Blackboard. But I will say that I like to use YouTube videos heavily and send out links, because I think that they can really help with understanding in like science processes. I will say there's some really good ones that are open access for educational purposes. So there's some really great links through like Science magazine. Science has a lot of them that are really great, that are allowed. You can freely distribute them or use them for educational purposes.
The Wii video was that you could go through them to a website and it would eliminate pop-ups and other stuff that could be explicit or whatever?
No, WeVideo is actually the webcasting tool. So that's what you would use to create your own webcast. So that's actually really nice if you are designing your course and you're going to be having this course for multiple semesters or years. It's nice to be able to record some of your own lectures, and then you can move that outside of class, and then they can make them watch it, and then coming into class, it's a way to flip it. So then the content's outside of class, then your lecture's outside of class, and then inside of class, they're doing the actual group learning, and you're there to kind of facilitate it and answer questions where the hard stuff is happening. That's going to be similar to the practice for your summative assessments.
Which was the one that you said that would filter websites.
So WeVideo just doesn't have the ads.
But it doesn't have ads.
It does not have
You don't
ads.
have, you weren't suggesting that there's something you can
No.
go through, okay.
No,
'Cause my-
if you use some of the free webcasting software, it has terrible ads. This one just doesn't have ads. It's nice.
okay.
So at VCU, we also have Kaltura, and that can be embedded in, that it is embedded in.
You have to- If you don't, so I know that you have to pay for that license. So I didn't have access to that as a postdoctoral fellow.
Oh, really?
So
Okay.
I tried to use Kaltura.
So if you're faculty, staff, or I guess at least if you're faculty or staff, you should have access to it for free through VCU. I'm
Okay.
not sure why postdocs wouldn't, but that's actually what we're using for
So this is what Ken had suggested. So he actually suggested this where everybody can use this and you can actually take this with you. You don't,
That makes sense.
anyway. So if you want to, you can email me with any questions. My email is, I can just give it to you. It's rksmith@vcu.edu. That's the best one to reach me at. And I will be able to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thanks.